As is customary with our programs, we are going to start with recitation from the Noble Quran. The recitation would be done by Qari Abdul Majid Noor, and the translation would be done by Mufti Qayyum Saab. So may I request Qari Abdul Majid Noor Saab, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون صدق الله العظيم.
My dear honored guests and elders and respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You have all enjoyed the beautiful voice of Qari, mashallah. May Allah bless him. The meaning of these ayahs, these verses of Quran, are something similar here. Virtue does not consist in turning your faces towards the east or the west, but truly virtue is he who is committed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the last day and the angels and scriptures and the prophets and distributes money, however much he himself may cherish it, upon his near of kin and the orphans and the needy and the wayfarer and the beggars, and for the freeing of human beings from bondage, and upholds the standards of divine communication and communion, and renders the purifying dues, that is zakah. And truly virtuous are they who keep their promises whenever they promise. They who keep their promises whenever they promise, and are patient in misfortune and hardship and in time of peril. It is they who have proved themselves true. Sadaqallahu al-Azim.
Jazakumullah khair for Qari Abdul Majid Noor Saab and Mufti Abdul Qayyum Saab, both for the recitation and the translation. Brothers and sisters, we are going to show a short video of some of the developments that are taking place in Kashmir, and after that we will continue with our program.
Just people who cannot take it anymore, but the government still is quite busy trying to manage the crisis.
And this has been going on. Most of the people who are younger among people and
the question of accession of the state of Jammu and Kashmir to India or Pakistan would be decided through the democratic method of free and impartial plebiscite.
India and Pakistan supported these resolutions, and even Prime Minister Nehru said in 1951, we had given our pledge to the people of Kashmir and subsequently to the United Nations. We stood by it and we stand by it today. Let the people of Kashmir decide. This resolution is still on the books. It's still in effect at the United Nations. The government of India should live up to a commitment that it made in the United Nations when they promised that the people of Kashmir would be given a plebiscite.
Affiliation of the entire state or any part thereof would not constitute a disposition of the state in accordance with the principles accepted by both the parties in Security Council.
The art-killing machines are wreaking havoc on helpless Kashmir society. They are engaged in wanton genocide of Kashmiri Muslims with no compunction. Over 7.5 lakh Indian troops are engaged in massacre, mass arrests, arson and humiliation of Kashmiris.
I think it is clear now that the imperative of reaching a solution to the dispute in Kashmir has become an international issue of the highest priority. The world must pay attention. The world is held hostage to this tragic conflict, which goes against all of our time-honored faith, not only in self-determination, but in democracy, in development. In Srinagar, you have more than 500,000 troops barracked within 5 minutes walk. Are they doing anything about developing the infrastructure of the region? No. What they do is to terrify young people and young students if they see them smirking or laughing or joking or walking in the street, and sometimes they take them away and they're never seen again. I flew into Srinagar, and on the way back to the airport, my doctor friend who was driving me, we were stopped 5 times within 150 yards before reaching the airport, each time by a different unit of a different regiment of the Indian Army. And at the 4th time, and each time we were asked to get out of the car, my bags were looked at, his car was looked at under the hood, we were body searched. We got back into the car, and finally I said to him, why do they keep doing this time and time again? He said, they don't trust each other. Now, if the Indian troops don't trust each other, how can the people who they are supposed to be protecting and defending trust them?
Since 1989, more than 83,000 have been martyred. Thousands of youth have been tortured to death. Villages and towns torched. Markets and bazaars to ground. Political activists have been blasted. Have been made at the lives of political leaders of the freedom movement. Intellectuals, professors, doctors, human rights activists, and scholars have been. Religious places and mosques have been desecrated and demolished. The desecration of the Dargah Hazrat Bal Shrine, sacrilege of Chirare-Sharif are but some of the illustrations. Kashmiris are the victims of massive abuses and gross human rights by India. The United Nations recognizes their right to determine their future through fair and impartial under UN supervision. Article 1D of Indian Constitution encourages settlement of international disputes by arbitration.
Almost overnight, occupied Jammu and Kashmir became one of the most militarized regions, concentration of over 500,000 Indian troops. To cover blood-stained hands and to hoodwink the world opinion, India again held sham elections in 1990.
The sufferings of Kashmiri people are and painful. The methods of torture used by Indian forces against innocent Kashmiris are so brutal and barbaric that they have put even Nazis behind.
This is the worst street violence here for years. After several hours, the police lose patience. First tear gas. Their lessons, some don't survive. In the next street, 14-year-old Javed was shot dead by soldiers when they opened fire on demonstrators. He was his parents' favorite, the youngest child, chosen to take over his father's business. His family insists he's bystander. But that's
DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. As we turn to the award-winning Indian author Arundhati Roy facing possible arrest in India on sedition charges after recent comments she made about Kashmir. Earlier today, an Indian politician from the right-wing BJP party filed a written complaint after she publicly advocated for Kashmir independence and challenged India's claim that Kashmir is a, quote, integral part of India. The area of Kashmir has been at the center of a decades-long dispute between India and Pakistan. Arundhati Roy made the comment at a conference organized to call on India to formally admit Kashmir, internationally recognized dispute. If charged and convicted of sedition, Arundhati Roy could face up to life in prison. On Tuesday, she defended her statements made at the conference. She wrote, I said what millions of people here say every day. I spoke about justice for the people of Kashmir who live under one of the most brutal military occupations in the world. Roy went on, quote, pity the nation that has deciders for speaking their minds. Pity the nation that needs to jail those who ask for justice while communal killers, mass murderers, corporate scamsters, looters, rapists, and those who prey on the poorest of the poor roam free. Well, last month I had a chat with the author of The God of Small Things, Arundhati Roy, about Kashmir. We spoke in London. She began by describing how Kashmir is the unfinished business of the partition of India in 1947.
Since the 1990s, which is when, at the same time that the war in Afghanistan, the American one is jihad in Afghanistan, and India realigned itself and became, what it is now, so completely aligned with the US. And, the whole
134, a silver Mazda 3, license plate BFMV134. Please come to the front desk. Thank you.
The whole problem in Kashmir, the militant armed struggle for independence. I mean, there was always a struggle for independence. It's not independence. It's not ever been really a part of India, which is why it's ridiculous for the Indian government to keep saying it's an integral part of India. But that armed struggle claimed the lives of 68,000 people, because India today has 500,000 troops manning that little valley. It's the highest, most zone in the world. India has done everything wrong. Apart from a military occupation, it has completely rigged elections. It has changed that valley into a little sort of puddle, a little of spies and informers, networks and torture chambers. And today, into a stage where people just had enough. Now you don't even know who the rulers are, or leaders of the uprising are, because it's just people who cannot take it anymore. But the government still is quite busy trying to manage the crisis. There's all sorts of shady things going on, claiming more business buildings on fire, when it does look very much as though the agencies are doing that themselves in order to once again paint this uprising in a different light. But the fact is that it's a bit like feeding a population heavy metal in its diet all the time. That metal, that toxicity, it just lives in the body, and it goes into different places at different times, but the body never gets rid of it. And now that toxicity has reached a stage where I really think that until the international community somehow pays attention, this small valley is going to be just squashed by this completely, intransigent juggernaut that is the Indian state, that will not back off, doing something absolutely immoral, absolutely as bad as it is in any other kind of occupation, including the Israeli occupation of Palestine, But Kashmir, nobody talks about. Of course, I spent a lot of time there.
And so, how does it fuel what is happening in Pakistan, and maybe even going into Afghanistan?
Obviously, Pakistan and India is the toxic center of that relationship, and unless it's resolved, I don't think any part of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India can be. That whole area is like getting more and more toxic, And what right now, the fact is that the U.S. is deep in all of it, and as far as because of what it's been doing in Pakistan and Afghanistan all these years, right now in India, the Congress government can't resolve Kashmir on its own, because the right-wing BJP is there to stymie it at any point of time, So it does need now an intervention from a larger community that is saying to this country that this is just not acceptable.
What do you think needs to happen?
I think there has to be a kind of undiplomatic, if you like, intervention. A lot of people from outside need to look at that issue very carefully and stop looking at India as if, oh, it's just this market where we can,
Brothers and sisters, that was just a brief glimpse into what is taking place in Kashmir. Before I say a few words in introduction, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Brad Butt, who's MP for Mississauga Streetsville. He's joined us already. He was elected on May the 2nd, 2011. He currently serves as a member of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and Status of Persons with Disabilities, and the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. We've also had confirmation from the Honorable Eve Adams, who is the MP for Mississauga Brampton South, which is incidentally this Friday. Her office said that she would aim to arrive here as soon as possible. She's at another meeting. The Honorable Jim Karigianis, Member of Parliament from Scarborough Agincourt, had confirmed, but I'm sure many of you would know, his father passed away last week and he had to leave the country. So he has sent a message for this program that we are going to share with you a little later. Also, the Honorable John McCallum, who's the MP for Markham Unionville. He was supposed to join us, but his office called that he has had to go into hospital with back problem. I hope it wasn't clearing snow as I had to do, but if it is of course a serious matter. We also have had intimation from the Honorable Bob Deckard, who's the MP for Mississauga Erindale. Of course, because of short notice, they said that they would try to arrive here as soon as possible, so let's see what happens. And of course, we have our friends from the Canadian Peace Alliance, Sid Lacombe, and James Clark from the Toronto Coalition to Stop the War. And also, His Excellency Nafis Zakaria, the new Consul General in Toronto, or let me clarify in case our brothers and sisters from Mississauga get offended. He's for the whole of the region, and for your benefit, he could not have arrived in Toronto without going through Pearson International Airport. So you were the gateway for his arrival here, so I'm sure you'll be very happy about that. As we go along, we have some other guests from different communities. We'll recognize them, but I want to share a little bit of a background of the issue of Kashmir, which is very important for us to keep in mind. I'm sure you are aware that Kashmir is the oldest unresolved dispute in the world. But recent developments have added a greater sense of urgency to what is taking place over there. On December 6th of 2012, the International People's Tribunal on Human Rights in Jammu and Kashmir released a 346-page report which documents the killings, the mass rape of women, and they actually identify some of the perpetrators. And they have named more than 500 very senior Indian officials, including 2 generals of the army, 3 brigadiers, 9 colonels, a number of majors and captains, etc., in the Indian Army, as well as senior officials of the police force and civil administration that have been involved in committing egregious crimes against the people of Kashmir. And what this report does further, and the compilers of this report, of course, are senior lawyers of India that serve both at the Indian Supreme Court as well as their various high courts. What they have said is that despite the fact that these perpetrators are known to the Indian government, yet the Indian government has taken an attitude whereby, far from punishing these officials, it has actually rewarded them by promoting them to higher posts. So that's one aspect of what is taking place in Kashmir. The other I'm not sure if you've been paying close attention, but it's something that I find personally very, very disturbing, and that is that a senior Indian official, who's the Inspector General for Civil Defense in Kashmir, Yoginder Kaul, on January the 11th, he issued a statement in Srinagar telling people that they should prepare underground bunkers for a possible nuclear war. Imagine an Indian official issuing a direct threat of a nuclear war. And when I read that report, I thought to myself, if a junior official in Pakistan had issued that kind of a statement, I can see what the uproar would have been worldwide. And yet a very senior Indian official makes such a threat, and yet that goes largely unnoticed. You see, the threat of nuclear war is no small matter. We need to keep in mind that Kashmir is surrounded by not 2, but 4 nuclear powers: India, Pakistan, China, and Russia. And it is a very volatile region that even with a minor flare-up can flare up into a major conflagration. But I think it is important for us to keep in mind exactly how this problem of Kashmir arose. We have to go back to the partition of the British colonial Indian subcontinent. It was decided at the time that in order to partition India into 2 dominion states of India and Pakistan, the following rule will apply: that areas that constituted, or in areas that were Hindu majority areas, would constitute India, and areas that had Muslim majorities would constitute Pakistan. Now, there were also about 550 or so princely states, and the manner in which the British exercised control was to appoint a Muslim ruler on a Hindu majority state and a Hindu ruler on a Muslim majority state. So that kept the people under control. But it was specified that in making their decision, these rulers, whether they want to be part of Pakistan or India, they have to take into account 2 things. Number 1, contiguity, that means how close they are to either Pakistan or India, and secondly, the wishes of their population. Now, the overwhelming majority of these states were only sort of large land holdings or villages, so it wasn't really a big problem. But there were 3 particular states that were crucial. One was Hyderabad, the second was Junagadh, and the third was Jammu and Kashmir. Now, it so happened that in Hyderabad as well as in Junagadh, the rulers were Muslims, but the majority population was Hindu. So India simply sent its military into these 2 states and said, well, the majority of the population is Hindu, so they belong to India, so they just occupied it. When it came to Kashmir, where 90% of the population is Muslim, he refused to, or he prevaricated in making a decision, and of course the people were upset, and instead he unleashed his military on the people, and that led to an uprising of the people in Kashmir, and the ruler fled Kashmir. And when he fled Kashmir, Indian and British officials came to him and they said, okay, we are going to help you, but you have to sign this instrument of accession to India. Now, of course, this was illegal on 3 counts. Number 1, the ruler had already fled the state. He was not there. So he was not in control of the state. He could not decide for the state. He had, in fact, abdicated his responsibility. The second was that he did not take into account the wishes of the people, which was absolutely evident to everybody over there that the people did not want to be part of India. They wanted to join Pakistan. And the third, that his instrument of accession was obtained under duress. And so from that time onwards, Indian troops have been in Kashmir. It has led to 3 wars between India and Pakistan. And as you saw in the video, there are a number of Security Council resolutions. And so we have a situation whereby it's a very explosive situation, and unless and until it is addressed, it can lead to catastrophic consequences for the whole world. Now, I want to mention a few other points. You saw Arundhati Roy talking about 500,000 Indian troops. In fact, the actual number is 700,000. And out of these 700,000, 300,000 Indian troops are in the capital city, Srinagar, which has a total population of 1 million people. So you have one soldier for every 3 civilians in that city. It is the most militarized city in the world. And there are, of course, a lot of terrible things that have happened to the Kashmiri people: murder, torture, rape of women, etc. I won't go into the details. But what I do want to bring to your attention is the fact that no people can be kept subjugated indefinitely. This is equally true of the Kashmiris as well. We also see, and I think this is something very interesting, that in the Pakistani side of Kashmir, there are no Pakistani troops patrolling the streets. There are no uprisings of the people. In fact, in the whole of, if you look at Pakistan and compare it with Azad Kashmir as it's called, Azad Kashmir is the most peaceful place in the whole of, in that whole region. In other words, the people that are with the in the Pakistani part of Kashmir are perfectly happy, and they want their brethren on the other side also to join them. The issue of the future of the people of Jammu and Kashmir has brought us together today to support justice and human rights for all. And we believe that our shared experience in advocating for this issue will result in closer working relationships on other issues as well. The quest for justice unites people in ways that go far beyond ethnicity or politics. We believe justice is indivisible. The Kashmiris deserve no less. And we thank you for joining us this afternoon to highlight the plight of the Kashmiri people and to support their cause by, first of all, highlighting what's happening over there, and secondly, thinking of ways and means to bring this terrible situation to an end through peaceful resolution. Because I don't think that wars ever solve any problems. If they solve one problem, they create numerous others. So I think we need to think of peaceful ways of resolving this dispute. Thank you for listening. I thought it will be important to give you a little bit of a background to the situation in Kashmir. And now I'm going to invite the Honorable Brad Butt, MP for Mississauga Streetsville, to share his thoughts with us. Could you please welcome the Honorable Brad Butt?
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to drop by this afternoon. I do apologize. Today has been Chinese New Year celebrations and many other things happening, so unfortunately I won't be able to stay beyond just very briefly talking to you today. One of the reasons I'm here is when I read the invitation to come today, this is what struck me the most. The invitation said the theme is Kashmir towards peaceful resolution of the conflict in South Asia. And you know, friends, that's the answer. The answer is dialogue like this. The answer is finding ways to work together in a peaceful and responsible way. I want to acknowledge the Consul General who is here, who has already been into my office in Streetsville and has met with me and is representing the Pakistani people and the Pakistani government extremely well in his new post. I told him it was an upgrade to come to Canada from England. I don't know if he agreed with that or not, but I think it is. But we're delighted to have you, and we're delighted for the fact that you want open dialogue with the Canadian government, that you want to make sure that we are aware of situations around the world and conflicts and issues where Canada can play a role in helping. And I think our government is demonstrating that we want to listen, that we want to be helpful and supportive to peoples all around the world, to religious minorities who are suffering discrimination and persecution in their countries, as well as situations like this where we have ongoing difficult geographic and political disputes where perhaps the Canadian government can play a helpful role in the future. So I'm simply here today to say thank you for coming together and having this important event and dialogue. And please keep in contact with your members of Parliament. We're not experts on these conflicts by any matter. We need to learn from you. We need to hear from you. We need to hear about these situations on the ground. And we need to see videos like this, because I'm certainly not aware of what's going on day to day on the ground. So it's good for me to have been able to be here and to see the issues that you folks are talking about and dealing with today. So again, to the Friends of Kashmir Committee, thank you very much for inviting me to be here on behalf of our government. And please, let's keep the dialogue going. Let's keep the contact going back and forth. Let's learn more. And if there is a role, an increased role for the Government of Canada to play in this ongoing issue, let's see what practical and positive role we can play. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And thank you for looking out for your brethren throughout the world and playing a positive and constructive role in that. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much for those comments, the Honorable Brad Butt. Brothers and sisters, as I mentioned, the Honorable Jim Karygiannis cannot be with us, but his message is going to be read to us by Imran Mia, who is the president of the Liberal Riding Association in Mississauga, Cooksville. And I think Imran probably also has political aspirations. I think it's very good. People in this country are free to express their opinions and should do so. And it is a good environment that we have here, so we should make the most of it. Even if we disagree with each other, I think we can do so politely and the Canadian way. I think you all know what the Canadian way is. It's well known around the world. So I'm going to invite Imran Mia to deliver the message from the Honorable Jim Karygiannis, please.
Okay, let me see if I could read this off my brand new smartphone. Good afternoon, everyone. As Bangi Saab mentioned, my name is Imran Mia, and I'm here on behalf of the Honorable Jim Karygiannis. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here because of a death in his family. I'd like to read the statement his office has sent to me. I do want to acknowledge His Excellency, the Council General, a Member of Parliament from Streetsville. So here's the statement. I would like to congratulate Friends of Kashmir Committee on organizing today's meeting to discuss the Kashmir dispute and human rights violations. Canada is a multicultural national that has attracted and continues to attract people from all over the world. As the liberal critic for multiculturalism, I have had the opportunity to work with members of various ethnic communities. I congratulate the organizers of this event and those who are fighting for causes that are being discussed at this event today. My very best wishes and congratulations once again for organizing this event. Thank you very much. Signed by the Honorable Jim Karygiannis. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Imran, for presenting that message on behalf of Jim Karygiannis. As you know, as he mentioned, because of a death in his family, his father passed away last week. So obviously that has prevented him from being here today. I'd also like to recognize amongst us some of our friends. We have Ken Stone from Hamilton. He is with the Independent Jewish Voices as well as the Global March to Jerusalem. We have Brother Ali Mallah, who is the former Vice President of the Canadian Arab Federation, as well as of the Global March to Jerusalem. We also have Sabrina Johnson from the Latin American community, as well as the Cuban community, and also Murtaza Gurukzadeh, who is also with the Cuban 5 committee. So we have guests and friends from other communities as well. I'm going to now request, or before I do that, I would like to mention that we had Senator Salma Ataullah Jan with us. She wasn't feeling well herself, and her, I believe her daughter or son wasn't well either, so she had to leave because she could not leave them alone at home. But she was here, and she had to leave before making a statement because of the urgency of the matter. So obviously her presence is appreciated over here. I'm going to invite Sid Lacombe, who is with the Canadian Peace Alliance. Sid has been a leading figure in the Canadian Peace Alliance and the peace movement, and he has spoken out against wars around the world. And Sid has, in fact, advocated for peace, and I think it is most appropriate that we should be talking about working towards a peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute as well, that has gone on since 1947. So could you please welcome Sid Lacombe.
Thank you very much, Brother Zafar, and thank you again for inviting us to speak here today. And I want to extend special thanks to Friends of Kashmir. As some of you may know, Friends of Kashmir recently became a member group of the Canadian Peace Alliance, which is a network of 150 organizations across Canada who stand up for peace and stand up for social justice. And we were happy to have them at our last convention. They, in fact, had the largest workshop of any of the groups that set up at our convention. And just to let people know, we are having another one this October as well, so please come out and hopefully we can replicate that result as well. Because there's a tremendous amount that Canadians have to learn about the situation in Kashmir. For many people, it just seems like another faraway place where there are layers of people who are fighting against each other. It's quite confusing to many Canadians who don't really have the expertise to understand what's happening. Not that they can't understand, it's simply the fact that the information is not made available, and there's very, very little of it that is put into the mainstream press beyond the obvious superficial analysis. I do hope that one day as well, you and I will be able to get together and discuss something other than gross violations of human rights. We've seen this, we see in the video, but we've seen the recent reports that have come out about the massive atrocities being committed against the people of Kashmir. It is the position of the Canadian Peace Alliance that all of these must stop, and they must stop simply by invoking the resolutions that have already been passed by the United Nations to demilitarize the area and to allow for self-determination for the people of Kashmir. We in the CPA stand for self-determination, whether it be for the people of Kashmir or for Afghanistan or for Syria or for Palestine or for anywhere else in the world where there are conflicts that are going on which are in fact causing the occupation of the population and causing the potential death and killing of thousands of people. So we stand in support of self-determination, not simply because self-determination is the right thing to stand for under these circumstances, but as others have alluded to, we are also tremendously afraid of the potential for this conflict to spill into a much, much larger either regional conflict or, heaven forbid, the possibility of a nuclear conflict. It is the position of the Canadian Peace Alliance that we stand up in opposition to any proliferation of nuclear weapons, but we need to be absolutely clear about why nuclear weapons exist in the world right now. They do so not because, I mean, the governments that we're talking about here, you look at the government of India, has absolutely no incentive whatsoever to get rid of nuclear weapons in the context that we're operating in. And why would they? Why would they if France has as many nuclear weapons as it wants, if Britain has as many nuclear weapons as it wants, if Israel has a clandestine nuclear program, which of course most people know about despite the fact that they still try to deny its existence. What we say is that nuclear proliferation will continue to occur so long as those states with the largest nuclear arsenals refuse to disarm. And I'm kind of upset that Mr. Butt is no longer here, because I would have liked to have talked to him about what Canada's role could be under those circumstances. The fact of the matter is Canada right now is not only not speaking out in favor of more requirements for non-proliferation, but is in fact spending a considerable amount of time and money, Canadian corporations in particular, being able to mine massive amounts of uranium to be able to make sure that nuclear weapons continue to be built, to make sure that nuclear technologies can continue to develop, to make sure that that waste will continue to pollute the world around us. That's what Canada's role is in this situation, and unfortunately it's really shameful. It is absolutely shameful that Canada is continuing to do this. The other question that needs to come up, if we're looking at a situation like Kashmir, where the biggest issue is this massive militarization that has occurred throughout that country, what sort of credibility does Canada have on the international stage to stand up and say, we support demilitarization? Oh yeah, we're also massively increasing military spending and spending $45 billion on new fighter jets that nobody is going to need and that is going to be used to kill people, innocent people who are generally fighting for their own self-determination on other parts of the world. Canada has absolutely no credibility whatsoever when it comes to calling for demilitarization. And this is something that this Conservative government is not only continuing with, but is expanding on. The government in this country right now is spending more on the military. Well, I mean, it was $15 billion in 2006 when they took over. It's now up to $21 billion, and we're actually just scratching the surface of the amount of money that Canada wants to be able to put into the military. Again, shame on Canada for that, and shame on them for being in a situation whereby they can stand up and say they support peace while continuing to arm the country and continuing to spend that much on the military. And so the Peace Alliance stands in opposition to the Canadian government's plans to militarize this country. We stand in opposition to the fact that this government in this country is one of the most racist and warmongering nations on earth. This is a country that is continually calling for war. They are continually calling for war against Iran. They are continually whipping up Islamophobia to be able to justify these wars. We have Canadian soldiers on the ground in Mali, and nobody heard about it until the media reported it the next day. This is not the kind of thing that a democratic country does. This is the kind of thing that a country... This is the kind of militarization that all of us need to stand up and stand in opposition to. We need to do that, though, with our partners from around the world and the people who are in this country who are talking about these various different conflicts, because, again, people do get lost in the mass number of conflicts that they're seeing around the world. And we need to be able to do the education here in this country for the Canadian people to understand not only what's going on in Kashmir, but also what is going on in Africa, where Canadian soldiers are now deployed, or in Afghanistan, or throughout the region. Why it is that we all need to stand up for self-determination for people in all of those countries. And so I do hope that one of the things that we can come out of this particular meeting with is, again, being able to have access to that information, to be able to distribute it to the Canadian Peace Alliance member groups across the country. Again, it's 150 member groups, but some of these groups are massive organizations, like the Canadian Labour Congress, which has 3 million members. We're talking about roughly 4 million people who are represented in organizations that are under the umbrella of the Canadian Peace Alliance. That is obviously going to be a difficult task for us to be able to get to all of them, but if we can do even a small fraction of getting this word out to people in those sort of organizations around the country, we can do what we can here to be able to stand up to this government, have it be an anti-war government, a government that does in fact call for peace and doesn't call for social justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sid, for those comments of support. And as you heard, the Canadian Peace Alliance represents more than 150 organizations. And I think it's extremely important that those of us who support the cause of the Kashmiri people should interact with them more deeply. They've already, in the past, as Sid mentioned, in 2011, at their annual convention, the Kashmir seminar was the best attended, and there were representatives from all across Canada that were very touched by what they heard, and I think it's imperative for us to reach out to them, to provide them the information, to ensure that we make more and more Canadians aware of this situation, and build a movement very similar to what our Palestinian brothers and sisters have done. As you know, the two issues of Palestine and Kashmir actually started virtually at the same time. But globally, obviously, Palestine has a much higher profile than that of Kashmir, and that's simply because the Palestinian people and their friends have been very active in terms of advocating their cause, and regrettably, we have not been as forthcoming and not as active as we ought to be. So I think this is a challenge for us, and we ought to rise to the challenge and make sure that the Kashmir issue is not sidetracked or brushed under the carpet. Before I invite our next guest to speak, I'm going to recognize one other person, Mr. Arif Raza, a very old friend of ours, a lawyer, by the way, a brilliant lawyer. I think he has not lost a single case in his career, which is something I don't think any lawyer can talk about. So, you know, of course he's a criminal lawyer, so don't commit a crime. But if you do, you know who to go to. And it's good to see him after such a long time. And now I'm going to invite James Clark. James is currently doing his PhD at York University, but even in addition to his academic work, he has been intimately involved with the Toronto Coalition to Stop the War. Both James as well as Sid have been instrumental in organizing rallies across Canada against war and against injustices. And they are, I believe, they are two of the most committed Canadians that I have come across. So could you please welcome James Clark.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Zafar, for those kind words and that generous introduction. Thank you, sisters and brothers, for inviting me and Sid and others here today to be a part of this special event. I'll begin by speaking a little bit about the Toronto Coalition to Stop the War. We're part of the Canadian Peace Alliance. We're one of the biggest member organizations from the anti-war movement. We represent about 80 labor, faith, community, and student organizations from across the GTA, and I recognize many people in the room here today who have been part of the Toronto Coalition on many of our demonstrations. And actually, we just recently celebrated our 10-year anniversary in November 2012. It's not actually an anniversary you want to celebrate. You don't want to be in this kind of business for more than a decade, and hopefully, as we continue to build a broad and inclusive anti-war movement, we can put ourselves out of business. But before then, I wanted to bring to you, on behalf of all those organizations and of all the groups that participate in the struggle for peace and justice, our greetings of solidarity to the Friends of Kashmir and to all of you who've been involved in this important struggle for peace and justice in Kashmir. And many of you know that the focus of the coalition has historically been the war on terror, which we know began in Afghanistan and then moved on to Iraq, and there have been many other fronts for that war. And the position that our coalition has taken, like the Canadian Peace Alliance, is to oppose the war on terror, because we know that it hasn't been a war on terror, but it has been a war of terror for millions of people around the world. And in keeping with that commitment and opposition to that kind of war and terror against ordinary people around the world who are seeking justice and self-determination, we have been very happy to include, as part of our mandate, opposition to what is happening in Kashmir today and historically. And so I should also thank the Friends of Kashmir, Zafar and Sid, have done already because of the work that they have done in educating the broader peace movement about this struggle and how important this struggle was. And I wanted to add just a few words about what happened at the Canadian Peace Alliance convention that Zafar just talked about. There were hundreds of people from across the country, from all kinds of different organizations, many of whom had heard very little about the struggle for self-determination in Kashmir. And it was so important that brothers and sisters from the community were there to talk about what that struggle is about and to explain it in terms that many people who have been active for more than a decade in the anti-war movement could understand, and to connect that struggle to the struggles in Iraq in Afghanistan, in Palestine, in Somalia, in all the other places that we have been organizing solidarity. Now, there are two important anniversaries that are coming up in what you might call the anti-war calendar. There's one that's coming up on February 15th, and recent demonstrations that happened 10 years ago on February 15th all around the world. I want to talk about that in a moment. But before that, I want to talk about another anniversary that's coming up a little bit later, and that's March 20th, 2003. And in case you don't remember, March 20th, 2003 was the day that the U.S. began its shock and awe campaign against the people of Iraq. And as we mark that anniversary, we should be very sober about what that war accomplished, or what the effects were of that war. 1.2 million Iraqi people have been killed since the beginning of that war and subsequent occupation. And that's in addition to 1.5 million people who were killed as a result of 12 years of brutal sanctions administered by the United Nations and the United States, and in which our government shamefully supported. And so when you think about that, the numbers of people who have died because of that intervention are approaching 3 million people. Those are staggering numbers for us to think about. But we should also measure what the U.S. set out to achieve in 2003 when they started that war, and what has actually happened. And the reason I want to talk about this for a couple of minutes is just to give us a sense of what is possible when ordinary people like us from all kinds of different communities come together in unity to mobilize against what sometimes feels like the most powerful and unstoppable forces on earth. When you think about what the U.S. said it wanted to do in Iraq in 2003, it said that it was going to leave a light footprint and move quickly on to Syria and Iran and completely redraw the map of the entire region. Right? We remember that. That's what they said they would do. When General Tommy Franks arrived in Baghdad in May 2003 or April 2003, shortly after the fall of Baghdad, he said, you know what, we're going to reduce the number of troops from 160,000 down to 30,000 in just 3 months because, you know what, we've got this thing taken care of. We're going to, wrap this up and move on to other things. Well, we know that the people of Iraq had very different ideas about what would happen. And because of the heroic resistance of ordinary people throughout Iraq, the U.S. wasn't able to do what it wanted to do in Iraq, and it wasn't able to do what it set out to do right across the region. And actually, ordinary people in the region have their own ideas today about what they think should happen. And again, the U.S. and the West are continuing to intervene in that. But the point of having this discussion is, obviously, we want to mark and remember what sacrifice Iraqis made in the course of the last 10 years, but it's also to remind ourselves that the powers that be, the most powerful forces in the world, don't always get their way. They don't always get what they want. They don't always get to determine what the world will look like on their terms. Many times they do, but when ordinary people begin to mobilize and build the kinds of coalitions that we've been building over the last 10 years, and not just those of us in this room, but people right across the country and indeed around the world, we can actually change the outcome of history. And I'm confident that if we can apply that same kind of method of unity and solidarity and support and commitment for self-determination and human rights on the question of Kashmir, that we can achieve tremendous results. I'll just conclude by talking about the other anniversary, February 15th, 2003, that I mentioned at the beginning. And I should also let you know here that this coming Friday, the Canadian Peace Alliance is going to be hosting an event in downtown Toronto. You can talk to Sid or me or Ali or Zafar to get the information about it. But we want to mark the 10 years of resistance that we all have been a part of, and how important it has been to come together. First it was around Afghanistan, and then it was around Iraq, but now it's on Kashmir and Palestine and so many other struggles. And that coming together of all those different communities and all those different struggles actually is what gives us our strength and demonstrates the possibility of what we can achieve. And so the reason I mentioned February 15th, 2003, is that on that day, 10 years ago, in over 800 cities all around the world, and actually on every continent, on all 7 continents, including in Antarctica, where a few dozen research scientists formed a peace symbol on the edge of the Ross Ice Shelf, between 15 and 30 million people all around the world marched before the war in Iraq began under the slogan, "Don't attack Iraq. Now, it's true, we failed ultimately in our goal to stop that war. But what we built on that day and the kind of mobilizations that we've organized subsequently have helped us win so many other demands, have helped us build a mass movement for peace and justice and for solidarity and for self-determination. And so even though we recognize what we might not have been able to accomplish in the last 10 years, we recognize that the forces of what some people call imperialism, what other people call superpowers, they don't always get their way. And it's important that we remember that when all of us come together, when we put pressure on our politicians, right, we should take up the invitation that we've heard from MPs to educate them about these struggles that many of them know very little about. We should take up their invitation to be in their offices, to be emailing them, to be phoning them, to be bringing petitions to them saying, next time there is a trade delegation to India, we want to make sure that Kashmir is on the agenda. Will Canadian MPs who go on a trade delegation to India, will they be raising the question of Kashmir before they leave and when they're there and when they get back? That's the kind of commitment that we want members of parliaments to be accountable for. So they've sent out the invitation. We should take them up on it and think about how can we continue to tell the story of the struggle of Kashmir to all the people who need to hear it, and to make sure that if they're not prepared to raise those questions, that we will mobilize the kind of pressure that actually did. If you remember, the greatest achievement of February 15, 2003 is what all of us did together to stop the Canadian government from sending troops to Iraq. Right? There are no Canadian troops in Iraq today, but there would be if we had not mobilized in our tens and hundreds of thousands of people over those many weeks. So those are the kinds of lessons that we want to remember and celebrate in the weeks to come, but they're also the lessons that we want to apply to the struggles that all of us are involved in. And it shows us that if you mobilize, if you build solidarity, if you support one another, if you talk to people who might not know a lot about your struggle but who are open to the idea of peace and justice, you can change people's hearts and minds, and you can change the course of history. And it's on that note that I think we can set some goals here collectively today for what we want to do for the struggle for Kashmir, and to make sure that it is not forgotten, but that it is at the heart and the center of all our struggles for peace and justice and self-determination. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Thank you very much, James, for those very enlightening words. And as he said, I think we should take up the invitation that Brad Butt, the MP, offered to us, and not only him, but all other MPs, that we should educate them about this situation. And next time there is a Canadian government delegation going to India, as they seem to be doing very frequently. A few months ago, Prime Minister Harper, along with a number of other ministers, was on his way, and I was surprised or struck by the fact that on the flight to Delhi, Harper had started eating samosas. He wanted to be like the Indians, you say. So I think we can perhaps ensure that next time they are going, that they take something more than samosas with them, that they take real issues, and the issue of Kashmir, and that it should be brought up over there. After all, they represent us and our feelings and our wishes. So those ought to be communicated in a clear and concise manner to the officials in India. We're not asking the Canadian government to send its army to Kashmir to liberate the Kashmiri people. We are asking for a peaceful resolution to that dispute. And that is something that we can press on and insist on, and hope that we can get across to them. And if not, then we have the other choice. When elections come, then we can elect people that would listen to our point of view. So that's something that we all need to keep in mind. As we proceed, poetry is one of the aspects that is very much cherished in the entire region, or in fact, not just the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent, but the entire region in Iran, in the Arab world, etc. And it is through poetry that people express their deepest sentiments. And as you know, one of the greatest poets of the last century, Allama Iqbal, was of Kashmiri origin. But I think if you travel around the world and you talk to people who are of literary bent, you would see how much they appreciate Allama Iqbal's poetry. I've experienced this myself in Turkey, in Iran, and a number of other places because of the inspirational poetry that he recites. And today we are fortunate to have a very good sister, Miss Zakia, who's been reciting poetry around the world. She's invited to poetry recitals, and she's going to express her support for the Kashmiri people through poetry. So could you please welcome Miss Zakia.
Assalamu alaikum. For my Canadian friends, today I would like to recite my poetry on Kashmir Day, a poetry of freedom, a poetry of determination. This poetry is in Urdu. Azadi Kashmir ka geet. आओ मिलकर आज मनाए हम यौम कश्मीर, आओ मिलकर आज मनाए हम यौम कश्मीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर। आओ मिलकर आज मनाए हम यौम कश्मीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर। गैरत रंग ये लाई है, गैरत रंग ये लाई है, एक उम्मीद जगाई है, एक उम्मीद जगाई है, जान देंगे कश्मीर की खातिर सबने कसम ये खाई है। अब जुल्मत पर वार करेगी हक की ये शमशीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर। आओ मिलकर आज मनाए हम यौम कश्मीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर। रब के घर में देर नहीं, रब के घर में देर नहीं, अब कोई अंधेर नहीं, अब कोई अंधेर नहीं, मतवाले आज़ाद फ़िज़ा के अब दुश्मन से ज़ेर नहीं। देखना एक दिन लेके रहेंगे हम पूरा कश्मीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर। आओ मिलकर आज मनाए हम यौम कश्मीर, क़ुव्वत और अख़ुव्वत की फिर बांधे एक ज़ंजीर।
Thank you very much, Sister Zakia, for that very moving poem. Brothers and sisters, normally when we have programs like these, we keep Pakistani officials out of our programs. But today I'm going to make an exception for a very exceptional person. And that's the new Consul General of Pakistan, Mr. Nafis Zakaria. The few encounters that I've had with him, I've been very impressed by his commitment and dedication, as well as, I must add, the dedication and commitment of his staff as well. It makes a lot of difference if you have a good man at the top, then that goodness permeates to the rest of the staff as well. And prior to his arrival, of course, we had Mr. Imran Ali Chaudhry, who was also very kind and considerate, and he tried to rectify, and I'm going to be very blunt, some of the damages that the previous officials had done. But I hope that we can put behind us and that we can move forward and work together for the common cause, which is our brothers and sisters in Kashmir, who definitely deserve our support and our sympathy and our encouragement. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Nafis Zakaria.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good afternoon and Assalamu Alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Bangash. First of all, before I make my comments here on the issue which we are discussing here, I want to add, Mr. Bangash mentioned about the lawyers or International Tribunal, People's Tribunal report, which was published December 2012. But before that, they had published a very touching and very factual report on the mass graves which they discovered in Kashmir. So I believe that is one thing also that makes me suggest that how a territorial dispute can transform into a human tragedy, and Kashmir is a glaring example of that territorial dispute transforming into a human tragedy. Well, when I started, before that, the parliamentarians were here, but in deference to their presence over here, I would like to address them with the honorable parliamentarians, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Kashmir dispute is the main bone of contention between India and Pakistan. It is a legacy of the British Raj, which has held the entire South Asian region's progress and prosperity hostage. Pakistan, being one of the two parties to the dispute, has a declared policy of extending moral, political, and diplomatic support to the Kashmiri people to realize their right of self-determination. In keeping with our national policy and objectives, every year on 5th February, the entire Pakistani nation at home and abroad and the government of Pakistan express solidarity with the oppressed Kashmiris in the territory under Indian occupation. This year also, President and the Prime Minister of Pakistan have issued messages of support, while the people of Pakistan also passionately demonstrated to assure their Kashmiri brethren that the efforts and our policy of steadfast support will continue until the UN Security Council resolutions on plebiscite for Kashmiris' right to self-determination are implemented. It is gratifying to hear so many voices of parliamentarians and intellectuals out in this great country who realize the perils of the dispute and feel the grief of Kashmiri people by calling for the dispute's resolution. However, only constant effort and greater participation can assure and give hope to the Kashmiris. The Kashmir conflict has caused 3 wars between India and Pakistan and brought the two nuclear neighbors to the brink of war several times, while the poverty thrived in the region. Nearly 1 billion people in the SAARC region alone remain in the abject poverty. The relations between the two neighbors, which have marred the progress of the entire region, remain extremely fragile, and mutual trust is so low that years of dialogue and confidence-building measures collapse at the smallest incident. Even a cursory glance at the reasons that have disrupted the dialogue in the past would confirm how vulnerable the relationship has been. In view of the theme of today's seminar, I am availing the opportunity to clarify the international community's misperception about Shimla Agreement that was signed between India and Pakistan in 1972. India asserts that as a consequence of the accord, the Kashmir dispute can only be resolved bilaterally. Further, that there is no room for the third-party mediation and that UN Security Council resolutions have been superseded. This Indian assertion is completely incorrect, like its other interpretations of the Simla Accord. A spokesman of the UN Secretary General in his January 1994 statement has rejected such interpretations. The Security Council his statement read, "The Security Council resolutions on Kashmir remain valid until the issue has been resolved." The issue remains on the Security Council's agenda to this date. Subsequently also, on many occasions, the UN spokesperson and in other UN Security Council statements, the latest being last month on 21st and 22nd, it has been clarified that the United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, as also the resolutions, will remain valid till the implementation of a resolution on Kashmir. Proponents of democracy have been hiding behind the Simla Accord and insisting on resolution of the dispute only through bilateral dialogue. It would be naive to assume that the world does not understand the strategic and economic reasons which are keeping some of the Western countries from intervening to resolve the dispute. The question therefore remains, given the fragility of relationship between the two neighbors, nuclear neighbors I would say, whether decades-long complicated issue of Kashmir can be resolved without international effort. The international community's active role to help resolve the dispute is essential. It is hoped that such a brainstorming session and expression of concern as witnessed today would generate momentum and sensitize the international community to its obligation. Peace and prosperity of the South Asian region would guarantee global peace and prosperity. The international community's apathy and disinterest is fraught with dangers, especially as the emerging and growing dispute over water resource in the same disputed region between India and Pakistan makes the situation even more perilous today. At the end, may I very humbly suggest to the honorable parliamentarians who are here and who had promised to come attend this seminar, and also the distinguished members of the civil society like the Canadian Peace Alliance present in this August gathering, to look into the possibility of establishing Friends of Kashmir group in their respective domains to help pursue the objective of today's seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those enlightening words, Consul General Saab. And I think, as he mentioned, it is imperative that we increase our efforts. And I would urge each and every one of you present here that we don't make events like these simply a once a year or twice a year affairs, but that we engage our friends in the broader Canadian community, as we witnessed from the Canadian Peace Alliance and the Toronto Coalition to Stop the War. If we reach out to them and engage them and interact with them, I'm quite confident that we can create a groundswell of opinion within Canada in order to bring the issue of Kashmir to greater light. I'm absolutely convinced in the nearly 40 years that I've lived in Canada, please don't think that that makes me very old. In the nearly 40 years that I've been here, I have found the general Canadian public to be very receptive. It's just that we fail to reach out to them. And I think we need to break that habit. We need to reach out to them, we need to engage them, and we need to interact with them so that we can bring some of these issues to their attention and form a united front against the injustices that are taking place all around the world, particularly in places like Kashmir. So it's extremely important that we make that commitment. We can invite our friends to come and speak at our events, but if we don't go out to the events when they organize them, then I'm afraid that effort that has been made would not bear fruit. So to each and every one of you, today, the message that we want to convey to you is that, sure, we want to get the issues highlighted, but more than that, we need to interact with our fellow Canadians so that we can take this to the next and higher level. So I hope and pray that you would do that and not leave this hall simply having attended one other program. I'm going to now invite Mufti Qayyum Saab. He is from Mississauga as well, and he's going to share a few words with us with respect to engagement in the Canadian environment. Mufti Saab, if you could please share a few words with us.
Your Excellency, Consul General of Pakistan, my dear friends, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think it has been repeated several times now during this session today, what message that our MP Brad Butt has left with us, and that is he asked very, very openly that we do not know the situation very well. So it is our duty to update them. And he very specifically mentioned that these videos like this that he has seen today, he has never seen before. And it is up to us, my brothers and sisters, that we have to be proactive and to convey the message and update our politicians, our representatives, wherever they are. And we should not blame them because they do not know. It is our duty. An MP is representing the whole country. Then he has to be abreast of the situation in the whole world. Now, he cannot be master of everything in the whole world. So this is our duty that we should take on the situation and update them properly. And again, the solutions to any conflict cannot be resolved with the taking the arms in hand. And that is the internationally accepted solution. Once I was in a Kojiko TV on a current affairs program, and this just happened that there was one other guest who was sitting next to me. He was a Jewish friend. And this interviewer, she asked me a blunt question. What do you think, what is the solution of the Middle East? And I just simply said, I just shook the hand of this person who was sitting next to me, and I said, look, he's a Jewish person, I'm a Muslim, and we are sitting on the same table, and we can shake our hands. So that is the way that we could go further and resolve our solutions, not that we can just simply, we stand there and you stand there and we have the solutions. As even in the Noble Quran guides us the principle. Thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Surah An-Nisa verse 135, O believers, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it is against yourself, your parents and your relatives, or whether it is against the rich or the poor. So that is the principle of the cornerstone of the Islamic ideology, is the justice. It is upon to us that do we stand it or not. And I always say that less words, more action. And if we are not involved and practically showing, if we are just saying, shouting, you know what, we are good Muslim, we are good people, Muslims are always good. Nobody is going to believe us until they see our character in action. We always whine and complain. You know what? Whenever there is the Muslim's name coming up, there is always a T word attached to that. Why is that? I should not blame them because they always have been bombarded with this propaganda. When there is a conflict going on in Mali, the news media says that these are the Islamists who are fighting for that, or the French forces are fighting against the Islamists. But when the same thing happens in Belfast, they do not take the name of the religion of those people who are fighting. They will be called as rebels, or the freedom fighters, or whatever it is. They would not even take the word of T, as we always hear for the people who belong to Muslim community, or they have the Muslim name similar. Even in Norway, what happened? When this young boy, I would say still a boy, then he went on and massacred 74 people. And the first news came in the media, oh, that was Al-Qaeda terrorist operative. And thank goodness there was nowhere near a Muslim name at all. So that is again up to us. Are we going to just simply sit back and think that somebody else will come and solve our solutions, or are we going to do something on our own? And that is, my brothers and sisters, that we had just started like 3 years ago. We started this with Family Day Walkathon, and it has become now an iconic event in the sheer cold, in -9 degrees temperature when we were doing it the first time. The young and old and the everybody together, and we were walking on the snow. And they were showing that, what are these people doing? Who are these people? Oh, these are Muslims who are helping the local hospital. And the hospital is being built not for Muslims. A Jew will be also taking the benefit of this facility, a Hindu will be taking their Christian, and so on and so forth. So we are not saying that we are helping the hospital just because we are Muslims and only the Muslims can take benefit out of this. Your name is already installed on the wall of the hospital as the Mississauga Muslim community. And when these 100,000 people who get benefit from that facility, they will see that in the distress, that these is the community, not the one I hear and see on the Fox News. These are the people who are helping the mainstream community. And that is, I ask you and urge you, please come forward, inshallah, on the 18th of February, that is a Monday, it's a holiday, it's a long weekend, 9:30 in the morning. Again, it's going to be cold. And I wish that there should be more snow, because people will realize that these are the determined people. This is the community of zeal and determination who brave the weather, and they come out for the good cause. And that is the way we should show the message of Islam in the most practical way. Not that when we show our character in such a way, then the people would like that, I want the company of this guy who is a Muslim, not the one I would run away from that. So that is the way, my brothers and sisters, this is the way to go forward. Inshallah, come with we have also partnered with the mainstream food bank. When you come, then their truck will be there. I don't want you to load that truck, by the way. I'm saying don't load that truck, overload that truck, because they should realize the Muslim community is the most generous community, and they are helping everybody, the neighbors around us. When the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that you are not a Muslim if you sleep with your stomach filled and your neighbor goes hungry, he never mentioned that your Muslim neighbor. He said your neighbor could be a Muslim, could be a Hindu, could be a Sikh, could be somebody else, but he is a human being. When once this janaza was going on for a person, he happened to be a Jew, and Prophet ﷺ, he stood up, and the people asked, Ya Rasulullah, he is a Jew. He said, so what? Is he not a human being? We should respect and honor the human beings, whoever they are, not because of the belonging of the religion or faith or the creed or color of the skin. I leave you for this message, inshallah. Come on the 18th of February, 9:30 in the morning in the city center, Mississauga, inshallah. We'll have a walk first, and then we will come to the main program. There will be Mayor Hazel McCallion, the ministers, the MPs, MPPs, and so on, and you will see the Muslims in action, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you very much, Mufti Qayyum Saab. But please don't ask for more snow. I mean, we barely dug ourselves out of the last one. Brothers and sisters, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out this afternoon. I know it has been a very difficult 2 days. At least I found it extremely difficult. I had to shovel snow 4 times in less than 24 hours. So, at my age, all my bones are already creaking. And I'm sure the rest of you probably feel the same way. But this is your commitment and your dedication to this cause that you made it today. And I hope that this would not be the last time that you would continue to do so. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you, and particularly Mr. Nafis Zakaria for his presence and the presence of his colleagues at this event. And I hope that we can continue our efforts and increase our efforts with respect to the plight of our brothers and sisters in Kashmir. So once again, thank you very much. We have some refreshments at the back. I'm sure that you'd be able to make your way there, and then after that we'll inshallah pray Maghrib prayers before we finally leave this hall. So once again, thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You know, Kashmir, nobody talks about. Of course, I spent a lot of time there.
And so,
brothers and sisters, we also have a literature table on the left side at the back. We invite you to please browse through the literature, pick up some material, except for some books that we have said you should not pick up, but the rest of them you can take with you. So please go to the table on the left side of this hall. Jazakumullah khair.
Is deeply in all of it, and as far as because of what it's been doing in Pakistan and Afghanistan all these years, right now in India, I mean the Congress government can't